Hello out there, guys. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm very excited because I've got a very special guest with me. Before we get into it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, just to help the channel out. Today, guys, I have got Amelie Gillerat. I was just trying to pronounce that off camera to see if I did it right, but I've probably still messed it up.
It's
Amelie,
okay.
Amelie's an astrologist, but not your normal astrologist. We don't have normal astrologists on the channel. We had Ola Wolny before, who's great, but Amelie's going to give her take on things. She's got a website. She reads the stars.com. I can vouch for her work. I've had a reading, but we're going to get into how she sees astrology, how it ties into the matrix coding and all that wonderful stuff. But it just helps us understand more. So, without further ado, Amelie, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Tony. How are you as well?
I'm doing very well as I could be in this crazy place. So, not
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me on your channel. I was very much looking forward to this and excited to share. Do have a little bit of a presentation that I will bring up a little bit later on,
yeah,
but I'll definitely start by introducing myself. I've got a little bit of a backstory, especially how I got into the kind of astrology that I do. It isn't very mainstream at all, as Tony kind of prefaced. So it took some rabbit hole deep diving to kind of discover. And basically, what I call it is true sidereal astrology. Basically, if you have seen the previous videos that of Ola Wolny being on the channel with Tony, she described it very well that tropical astrology or mainstream Western astrology is outdated. It's a frozen system and it no longer aligns with the actual current sky and what astronomers would track in the sky with telescopes. So, realistically, if you're using tropical astrology, this system, if you were to create a chart, it no longer aligns with the sky, therefore, it's technically inaccurate. Because if we're talking about astrology being the influence of the stars above, then it makes no sense to not follow the visible, planets, stars, and all of that in the actual sky, and instead using a system that is based in literally 1 BC. So, just to give a bit of a background of tropical astrology, it's when the seasons and the constellations aligned in about 1 BC is when they, I guess, decided to freeze the astrological system. But in doing this, they've disregarded the precession of the equinox. And I don't want to use too much astrological jargon so I don't lose you. But it's basically just the shifting of the constellations along the ecliptic. The ecliptic is the path of the sun. And when this happens, that's basically the natural evolution of the cosmos, meaning that it's ever changing and ever evolving, like nature does, right? But they have disregarded this, meaning that now, since the ecliptic moves, the precession of the equinox moves at about 1 degree every 72 years, and it's been, I don't know, the chronology of history is a little bit iffy, but say that it's been about 2024 years since this alignment with the seasons. That means that the constellations on average have shifted about 28 degrees, which is probably why you might have heard that you are possibly a different zodiac sign. Well, it's because of that. You're hearing about sidereal astrology not aligning with tropical astrology. So, long-winded way of saying that I'm following the current sky, what's actually placed above. And that's because even back in 1 BC, that's what they were doing as well. They just decided for the purpose of the Bible or different astrological texts, because at the time, that is when the seasons and constellations aligned, they decided to just stick with it, or possibly with a little bit of an agenda behind it, which we can get into.
never.
Yeah, always, right?
Yeah, yeah. The one thing that I've taken from both my readings with you and Ola is you really understand yourself a whole lot more once you get that right. It's like yeah, it's like you're coding, isn't it? Basically, so it really explains a lot about how you are the way you are. So Can you just explain a little bit more about like the coding nature of what you're doing?
Yeah, 100%. So it definitely, our realm is definitely set up a little bit like a mechanical universe, or even a zodiacal matrix, if you want to call it that. Um, I do in the presentation do a little bit of like a analogy representation of how you can look at it that puts it into a lot of perspective. As a little bit of a spoiler alert, it looks like a spider web. So you can see it as in the sense of it kind of catches us. And when we're born into this realm, we kind of are imprinted with this astrological code. So basically, when, I read Tony's chart, when I've read my own chart and hundreds of others, especially using the true sidereal system, the accuracy is unmatched. It's really suspicious that I don't know my client. Like might just be the first time I've met them. They're a stranger to me. And you can see the testimonials on my website that they do agree that it's extremely accurate and reads them in a sense and also gives them certain advice, making it seem like you are living in this realm thinking that you're essentially free, but a stranger could look at all the positioning of the constellations when you were born and read so much about you. So it's kind of like, okay, we're pretty much born with some sort of cosmic blueprint. And to a certain extent, it is like a bit of programming. And the interesting thing is that there's kind of overlays in the sense of how you read an natal chart. You can see the parts that are kind of for your true soul's evolution, the positive supporting aspects of yourself and what's really awaiting you as in your highest potential. But then there's placements in your chart that are there on purpose, almost like some kind of setback limitation in like purposeful challenges to hold you back from almost living your true path in life. So when you read an astrological chart in this sort of viewpoint, then you can kind of see that, okay, there are definitely parts of the zodiacal matrix that is implementing things that kind of keep us limited, keeps us small. Whatever it is, each person's is different. For someone, it might be that they are so trapped in the material, it's very hard for them to comprehend or grasp anything beyond their five senses. Or for some people, it's even more, it's very intricate. Like I can't really even bring up specific examples, but even the South Node is one of the most difficult placements because that is your coded comfort zone. It's the part where, humans really don't like change on the fundamental level of, evolutionary. And so the South Node feels so familiar, so comfortable. It's where you would need a lot of bravery to leave that. It's a difficulty to leave that. So most people go their entire life not having left and moved on from the South Node placement in their chart. And so they haven't really actually grown too much. They haven't challenged themselves to a level that is going to allow them to master their zodiac chart and actually live their true life, which is the underlay in the chart that you can read. That is currently everyone's born with it covered by other overlays that are kind of archonic, if we can get into that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that this realm is has been overlaid. I think it's like a copy. Um,
Mm.
I talk a lot about the chakra overlays, the chakras being another overlay. Um, and I definitely feel that our astrological chart has also been overlaid as well. I feel
Yeah.
that's what's happened. We've got that like our initial blueprint or our initial coding, as you say, and they overlay it with all this other BS stuff. So I found that very interesting when you mentioned that as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And a lot that I do learn is just from experience of reading so many charts. Like it's what I do. And the more that I read them, the more that I get experience of even talking to people um, about their chart, the more that I learn and discover. Because a lot of what I do isn't even from, an astrological teacher. I learnt the fundamentals of astrology through a school, but when it comes to the extras of what I know, it's from research, looking into ancient texts and books. And what's very fascinating is, I mean, I might as well just open the PowerPoint because I feel like I'm
Yeah,
just going
yeah.
to get ahead of
Let's get
myself.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll open this up. Um, I'm just requesting you for the share screen.
Okay, I've accepted.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so
Can you see that all right?
yes, got it.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so, well, this is where I was just going to talk a bit about the, I guess, corruption in modern astrology and how far it's merged from the true path of ancient mystic astrology. Back in previous ancient times, astrology was something that was considered a very advanced fundamental knowledge. And science literally means knowledge. So, according to etymology from the Latin word scientia. So, essentially, now these days, it is seen as a little bit of a joke, a bit of it's become extremely propagandized, used for I guess just marketing purposes, and also just trends essentially. So it's really veered from the path, not only just in tropical astrology being, inaccurate and not aligning with the visible sky, but also in the sense of if you were to ask anyone on the street these days, they're not going to know the first thing about it. And they're also going to dismiss it completely. Most people, they just dismiss anything that they don't know about, anyways. So when you actually go to someone and they decide to take the time to research into astrology to the extent that I have or somebody else who's very similar, they're not going to deny it because they've started to understand it. Although most people, it's been cut from our education system, even though back in the Middle Ages, it was literally one of the four quadrivium subjects. So I believe that's arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And astrology has always technically been the exact same as astronomy. They've just been separated for the idea of making astrology seem like a pseudoscience and astronomy a science. But either way, astrology was fundamental knowledge in medicine. It was compulsory in university. It was something that everyone had knowledge of, but that is no longer the case anymore today. And this is because of an agenda to kind of hide the truth, right? If the sky really does tell, which I'll show you from certain scriptures, the will of God or God's plan is really written in the stars, even through all the books that were cut from the Bible, is it's blatantly telling us that. And then we've got movies like Don't Look Up that's all about astronomy, yet it's programming us to completely dismiss it and continue, living our own lives, not realizing that we have this giant clock above us. It is actually, we are living in an earth clock and that we are meant to be super ignorant of it. And that really keeps us small, it keeps us limited because whether astrology is good on or bad, it's still there, it's still present, and it's still working. And
And
same way that
they
we,
don't mess around with it. They use these
no,
things to their
yeah,
advantage. So yeah, if they're using it to their advantage, then we need to understand it as well.
exactly. That's 100% accurate, Tony. They definitely use this to a T, essentially. In everything that they plan, even years ahead, they've taken into consideration certain astrological placements because they know that we are influenced by the stars. It's just a fact. Even when you're talking about the chakras, literally there are seven chakras in a human body, seven classical planets, and then there are also the seven endocrine glands
Mm.
as well. So basically they are completely tied up. I know there's the idea that there's, I don't know, something 100 plus chakras, but the seven essential chakras,
Yeah,
it's all about like
the non-essential
numerological
chakras.
synchronicity. Oh, okay. Yeah. But the idea is that there's so many numerological synchronicities that show how physically connected and spiritually connected we are to the cosmos. It's
Mm.
not just a sense of, oh, astrology doesn't affect me if I don't believe in it. No, your biological makeup literally reflects the stars. Not only that, the fact that there are 12 constellations, there are 12 major systems of the human body, and then on an even finer level, there are 12 essential tissue salts. So, and then you can even go into the 12 cranial nerves. It's not just coincidences, it's literally to the sense of we are actually almost tethered to the stars in some sort of way.
I'd say
I don't
we
know if
I'd
this is,
say that's the perfect word to use.
yeah, well,
Even when you even talking of tethering, like we have this tether apparently from our spirit body to our body, when we pass over, people talk about being tethered and all that stuff. So
yeah,
I think it's an accurate word.
yeah, definitely. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this if I play it, but I made this video a little
Well,
while ago. I'll just try play it. Oops. Could you hear that?
no, nothing came through.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I could hear it.
Oh, right. Uh,
That's a bit of a bummer if you couldn't hear it, but
no,
we might
I
be able to
didn't.
sort something out. I could probably send you the video.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, well, that would be a little bit controversial to see, of course, with the geocentric Earth model. However, the idea still stands that the zodiacal wheel and matrix is like a clock, and Earth is really set up like a giant clock where the sun tells the time, moon tells the day, stars tell us the month. And we also have what's called the Great Year Cycle, which is defined by the constellation that rises on the eastern horizon on the spring equinox, which is in the northern hemisphere. And that tells us our current age. Currently, as of this year's spring equinox, the Piscean constellation was rising on the eastern horizon. But we are approaching a time when the Aquarius constellation will rise then. And that's when we'll be marking, saying that we are in the Aquarian age, which astronomically hasn't started yet. But the idea is that the precision of the ecliptic is the clockwork of our time, and this is really fundamental to know because it is a major truth that is being hidden from us on purpose. Because if we really knew the truth of the idea that Earth is a giant clock and the sense that, it kind of resets itself every so often, that's a major truth that would really, if that got out, it would just change the world, honestly.
Hmm.
Because it's something that our ancient ancestors knew about
Is that
and
what
told us about. So,
the Mayans were talking about the reset? Because they've got the
yeah,
clock,
I think,
won't they?
yeah, every culture essentially talked about how Earth does reset every so often, kind of like a chessboard game or however. And no one can ever predict when it would be, but you can have like rough ideas,
Okay.
but no one knows like how or when or whatever. But the essentials, it's the kind of the idea of the Plato's Great Year, the gold, silver, bronze, Iron Age, or the yugas in the Eastern religion. They're all kind of very similar ways of telling us that Earth has different ages. And even in Revelations in the Bible, where it says, things like end of the world, when you look at the etymology of the word world, it literally means age of man. So it's not Earth getting destroyed, it's just an end of an age and the beginning of a new one.
Okay.
So again, we were looking at the same map here, but it's because when you overlay it and you look at it like this, because there are 12 hours on the clock, 12 constellations, and you can divisibly segment the map into 12 sectors, they are undeniably similar, especially in the sense that if you want to overlay it like this, where this is Earth, this is the zodiac wheel, which is a perfect circle, by the way. That's why it does look like this, because when you look at it in the sky, it is a perfect circle. And then the very center point is the North Pole and Polaris is in the sky. So it's like symmetrical. It's perfectly overlaid, which just shows us that it was definitely designed. And this is where I'm also saying, the Polaris star being the center point directly above the North Pole. So this is essentially in the sky what the ecliptic kind of looks like. And they are really laid out in a perfect circle. And I only use the 12 constellations. I use the exact degrees. That's why I said true sidereal, but I don't use the 13th constellation. It, I've got a video on my YouTube that you can look at this later. This actually does include a fucus, but I just wanted to chuck in a picture of the ecliptic anyways.
Okay.
But yeah, I only count the 12. When I'm looking at a fucus, I just count it as Scorpio because in the sky it's just on the house of Scorpio. But yeah, you can definitely check out my video on that. And let me take this. Our faces are blocking my writing. But yeah, so this is the idea that we do live in a mechanical universe that was talked about by many ancients, even in the Gnostic Nag Hammadi library. And there's different quotes that you can take, such as from the Hermetica, which is saying things like, I will build the zodiac, a secret mechanism in the stars, linked to unerring and inevitable fate. The lives of men from birth to final destruction shall be controlled by the hidden workings of this mechanism. And then there's few can escape their fate or guard against the terrible influence of the zodiac, for the stars are instruments of destiny, which bring all things to pass in the world of men. Many ancient books talked about astrology. Even the Bible talks about the Mazzaroth, I believe, is the word for zodiac. And they they all say it in different perspectives. This one is mentioning that it's very much a mechanism of control. Other books tend to put it in the perspective of it's God's plan or God's will, and
Mm.
not necessarily in an evil sense. But no matter what, no one was ever denying the fact that it does control us in some way.
The way I see this is if this is an AI, this is the programming of the game, basically, of the system.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's evil. I think it is evil. But yeah, that's the way I see it. Just the programming of the AI of the game or whatever
Yeah.
it is that we're in.
Yeah, I do agree with you in the sense that for a long time I've kind of seen this as a little bit of like a replica world as well. And the sense that even if in the original version of Earth or whatever, the zodiac was more, authentic, at least in this realm, we can still look at it like there's been some sort of overlay that does control us and limit us.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Because when you really start to see and look at things on an advanced spiritual level in this realm, you realize that whatever entities are here don't want us to leave. And it's obvious that we are disconnected from source because we have to consume in a carnal nature other living things to survive.
Mhm.
And I'm very deep into nutrition, and our biology literally does require that. But in the golden age or the original realm or whatever you want to say, they even say that there's no, consumption in heaven. There's no sleep in heaven. You don't have to eat and drink and do all these very carnal, low frequency acts of survival because you are connected with source energy, God, whatever you want to say. And that does show us that what we are living in right now is very low frequency, very carnal, very material and physical. And so, to some sort of extent, we are living in some kind of matrix that has a mechanism of control that wants to keep these souls here circulating in this world so that we don't leave because they also require us for fuel and source because they don't have maybe the entities don't have bodies that they consume things that they consume our energy like Lush or something like this. So there is that possibility that, the great architect or, the other version of God, the Old Testament God, did create, or the Anunnaki or something created this overlay of the zodiac, controlling it in some way that has in essence basically limited us, because when you read an astrological chart, you see that okay, this person's program is holding them back in this way, is keeping them here in this way, it's doing this to them in this way. And that's when you see, wow, if we really had all the free will and we were born here to really grow and, achieve things, we wouldn't have programmed ourselves with these sort of limitations. That doesn't make any sense. I don't care for what lesson that your guru wants to tell you it's for.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't happen. It's so stupid to just continuously go in the same repeating patterns your whole life, which is what happens with people.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people when they read this and might be thinking, well, the lives of men should be controlled. A lot of people might think, well, what's the point? But I know I believe it, and I know from our conversation when you did my reading is that we can transcend these things. We're not, we can understand them, but they can potentially hold us back, but we can overcome them
Yeah.
and kind of flip the script literally.
100%. You can look at it like writing your own music. I think there's 12 main notes in music, just as there's 12 constellations. It's also very tied and very similar. And I think that, I might be getting them mixed up because I'm not a musician myself, but there's like 12 either notes and seven letters, which I think is possibly the case, and the seven classical planets. So you can look at your chart as your own music for this lifetime, and you can retune and rewrite your song as long as you have the awareness to do so. How can you go out in life and fix up something that you don't know needs to be fixed? It's really through self-knowledge and awareness that you can create more free will and have more control over your destiny and reality in life. Unlike most common belief, destiny is not set in stone. I don't believe that destiny is set in stone. I think that you're walking a path, but with more conscious awareness, you can actually, have control and rewrite it to a certain extent. And I guess I'll just use my like a little bit of mine for an example, which really has changed my life that I don't think I would have. This is some sort of pattern that a lot of people wouldn't have woken up to if they hadn't have really delved into self-discovery. And for me, it's the idea that because of a real like strong placement in my chart, especially with my South Node in the fourth house, really connecting me to my home and family. It doesn't mean I have issues with that, but it means that with the Libra placement, I work to please my parents. I work to always, be on their good side. For me, what's scary and challenging is doing what I know I have to do, but maybe my parents don't agree with. Or maybe it's like causing a little bit of imbalance in my home or corruption or something like this. Not in like a intentionally bad way, but for me to be able to, take more leadership in life, like dive straight in towards exactly what I want to do, whether that's something entrepreneurial and my parents want me to go down a little bit more traditional route. This is just an example. It's scary to me and it's hard for me to actually say, you know what, mom and dad, I have to do it this way. Like I know that you want me to do it this way, but I have to take these risks. I have to do this. I have to be, a pioneer in this field. I know it hasn't been done before, but I'm gonna do it because I know I have to. The thing is that if I didn't have, I don't know how long I would have kept going in the cycle of constantly trying to keep the harmony and balance at home and with my family, which would have been keeping me away from the possibility and the future path that I could have been living in so many different avenues, not just with work, but in, just taking leaps in life and living free, because the Matrix wanted to keep me small by keeping me always living at will by my parents, always asking for their advice before I make any decision, always, you know, me seeing my parents on a pedestal to the point where I can't actually go and do this because I feel like I need their approval first, no matter how old I am. A lot of people without the self-awareness and self-knowledge would keep living in whatever the cycle is for them, which is keeping them away from their highest potential, which is keeping them away from bringing to the world what they were here to bring. Do you see what I mean? There's an overlay. It's like on your chart, you've got this amazing highest potential and destiny and life path to live, but the Matrix has programmed you with really difficult things. You know, for someone who doesn't have this in their chart, it's not going to sound that difficult. Maybe you're rebellious to your parents anyways. But for me, it's very hard. For me, I see my parents as like my favorite people in the world, you know? I
Yeah.
see them as like my guides. And for me, it's really, really hard to do anything that they would disagree with or that they are telling me it's not wise. I'm like, oh my God, like it puts fear into my mind. I'm like, I don't want to do this. But every time that I do, it's literally diving me straight towards my highest potential and path and like actually opening up and unlocking different parts of my natal chart that is going to just expand my life. And Tony, you can resonate with whatever yours is. I don't want to say yours in detail, but basically it's just like you've had things that hold you back, but you've had to have the confidence to overcome, to step into know what you know that you need to do, and it's just opened up so many different doors for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind sharing a little bit. Obviously not all of it, but yeah, like one of my things is like for me, I would just like to like hide away and never be seen, just I don't particularly like being out there publicly and stuff. It's not my it's not my preference, but I've pushed through to, move towards my highest potential. So that's the kind of thing that was in when you read my chart, that was what one of the things that came up that, I might just want to hide away, not be seen, and the stuff that comes with being out there, all the, abuse and stuff. Um, but yeah, I've pushed through that and yeah, I'm more aligned with my highest potential. So that's, I guess, another example of how we can
Hmm.
transcend our charts. They don't actually have to own us.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, and everybody has their own South Node, North Node placements that it resonates. And a lot of people, like I was saying with you, Tony, you're very advanced. You're an advanced soul because coming onto the call, you've already actually done so much in life that has propelled you away from the South Node. So naturally, you're already a very advanced being in this earth and have come in with more conscious awareness in this lifetime. But for a lot of people, they could be well and truly into their life and they still haven't had the bravery to break free from their South Node placement that's holding them back so much. And so that's when it takes, first of all, awareness, and then it takes action to actually follow what you need to do to be able to rewrite your music and rewrite your song. So you're never going to necessarily chuck your zodiac chart in the bin. It's always going to be there, but you can actually rise above it and you can master your own zodiac and master your own chart for sure.
And I think when you understand yourself on your coding level, I don't know, I just like to refer it as
No,
coding.
yeah.
When you understand yourself at a coding level, then it just makes things more easier. You like when like you understand why you react like you do, why things hurt like they do, because you understand, well, this is here in your chart and that's part of it. So it's almost like you can detach a little bit from perhaps
Yeah.
the heaviness of your chart. So
100%. Yeah. And it is easy to look at it like a code and a program because, I mean, that's what it is.
yeah,
But
exactly.
yes, basically, this is where we come into my little bit of a spiderweb analogy for the zodiac.
Right.
That essentially you can imagine yourself like a fly. I know it sounds gross, but flies are what get caught on spider webs. So I know that a soul is much more beautiful than a fly, but essentially, this is imagining yourself coming into this realm and then look at the spider web like the zodiac wheel. Now, first of all, they look extremely similar. And also, flies are basically what get caught on the spider web. So basically, it's like upon birth, whatever's going on in the cosmos at the time of your birth, where you are in the world, and on the date, that is basically snapshot and imprinted. So you can almost imagine yourself walking around with like this wheel above your head because it's imaginary, but that's practically what's going on. We've literally been imprinted with what's called a natal chart, which is just the snapshot of the sky at the time of your birth. Now, this is one way to look at it because a fly gets caught on a spider web, and then same way as our soul almost gets imprinted by the zodiac web. So that's the way that I've put it that can make it a little bit more easier to comprehend. And it's the idea that, well, I guess you can, it depends what way you want to go. I know that the spider eats the fly. That's not necessarily what happens, but with the soul. But, whether the spider is the demiurge or the great architect or whatever, just think of it as like the master controller of this zodiac that you've been imprinted by. So there's also, as I mentioned, there's a major connection between ancient scriptures and astrology. The Bible has been extremely orchestrated because we know a lot of books have been removed. So a lot of modern Christians today and through all different religions, because they're extremely similar and interconnected, but they basically don't believe in astrology at all, and they think that the Bible condemns it. However, when you go to look into all the different books that have been removed from the Bible, they extensively talk about astrology as very relevant, very real, as kind of like God's plan, God's will, the will on earth. There's even the prayer, who art our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's literally talking that the heavenly kingdom is reflected on earth the exact same way as it is in the heavens. It's kind of an astrological prayer to a certain extent. The idea that God's will in heavens is reflected on earth, same as the Hermetic principle as above, so below. It just takes research within. But Gnosticism is interesting because it's one of those religions of the kind, not an official religion, but I don't know what you want to call Gnosticism, to be honest, but like a group of people of the past who had a certain set of beliefs that was a little bit pessimistic, but can become very relevant when we're talking about astrology in the context that I'm talking about today. So the Gnostic text basically considered astrology as a negative controlling mechanism, pretty much implemented by the demiurge, which is like the creator god of this realm, but is also, they tied it very closely with the Old Testament God of the Bible as well. So their ultimate goal was to be freed from the wheel of fate by stars in virtue of gnosis. And gnosis basically just means knowledge, which is what we're talking about, how important self-knowledge and awareness is. And in Gnosticism, the archons, which in Greek means ruler, are considered malevolent, sadistic beings who control the earth, as well as many of the thoughts, feelings, and actions of humans. So the idea is that they assisted the demiurge with the creation of the world and continue to help him administer his oppressive rule. And that astrology is supposedly a useful tool to help you know yourself and identify past things. Now, karma, I'm not even going to go into that, but I don't necessarily believe in karma the way that other people believe in karma.
Yeah.
However, basically, the whole point of the Gnostic journey is to ascend past the dome of the heavens, rewrite your path, and liberate yourself free from your natal chart in the sense of kind of rewriting your code. But the idea is that humans were supposedly created by the archons, so then for it was designed to be extremely susceptible to the influence, or we were almost unable to resist it. Only the divine spark from heaven, which had slipped into creation despite the Archon's intentions, gave people any kind of chance of resisting the temptations. But only few are supposedly to have that divine presence within themselves. And even for them, it's still a tremendous ordeal to act in accordance with that presence rather than the wishes of the Archons. So basically, most people are just puppets of the Archons living by their code and programs. Now, to sum it up, that's just to give a little bit of an idea of how astrology is talked about in the Gnostic Bible. Well, I just called it a Bible, oh my God. But but the idea that they did talk about things like karma and everything. However, essentially, there are seven archons and seven classical planets. Then there are the 12 aeons and 12 constellations of the zodiac. So here again, we have very synchronistic numerological connections in this, I still don't even know what to call it, in this belief system. And the idea is that the archons are kind of considered the planets that control the humans. And again, we have these planets imprinted in our body through the endocrine gland system, like the pineal gland, the okay, well, I don't know why this
Pituitary,
the
pituitary,
pituitary, yeah, the pituitary. I was like, wait, I'm thinking of the pituitary as the endocrine gland. But
endocrine,
yeah, anyways, hormones.
mind
Um,
wipe.
yeah, that's right, it's happening. But yeah, so basically the idea is that we are extremely connected within them and that we essentially, even with the divine spark, as they called it, they had like the three types of man idea where there's just the animal man, which is kind of like just running on instinct, survival mode, animal mind. There's not too much higher thinking going on. Or you can, like a little bit like an NPC. This is just their belief systems. And then there was the souled man, which is basically there's a soul, but it's kind of from this realm. And then there was the divine spark man, which is kind of like having a Christ spirit within that is very much from the external world. So that's those people that seem to just be able to comprehend things from outside of this world that other people don't seem to be able to comprehend. So that's their belief system. And what they're saying here is that the idea was to be able to rise throughout this realm, which is kind of by resisting the temptations of the zodiac. Because it's very easy to just be a puppet living your life by the code and programs of the zodiac. It's kind of difficult to have self-awareness and take the narrow path to, I guess, like neglect all the controlling aspects of the zodiac. It's typically more difficult. But again, I kind of got ahead of myself here, representing the seven archons and the seven planets. But there's also many different synchronicities with the idea that there's even the 7 days of creation, there's the 7 days of the week. They all extremely closely entwine each other. And there is the idea that in ancient thinking, each planet occupied one of the seven celestial spheres or layers of the sky. So therefore, one of each seven archons ruled over their own celestial sphere. So that's a further way for the archons to inhibit people's spiritual progress. And the idea that after you die, you want to transcend those seven spheres. And I guess you can look at it as a way of did you master those planets in your chart, which is just from having knowledge over them, see how they are influencing you. And the more control you have over them instead of them controlling you and holding you back from being able to liberate past those celestial spheres after death, I suppose. So here I put this together. It's the idea that the seven planets and the 7 days of the week are etymologically very close, especially in the French language. And then here is where I talked about the very many books that were removed from the Bible. This is just a quick link of them all that you can even pause and go and look into one of them or one or two. But I took some very specific examples for one specifically from the book of Baruch from the Apocrypha. So the stars are very much mentioned as part of God's creation, highlighting their role in displaying divine wisdom and power. Now, the stars in this text are seen as signs of God's control over the universe. Even in this book removed from the Bible, it's still talking about how the cosmos is God's way of controlling this world, which has influence on both natural events and human fate. So there's a quote, the stars shone in their watches and rejoiced. When he called them, they said, here we are. And so with cheerfulness, they showed light to him who made them. So the stars are depicted as being part of God's creation, responding to his command. The light and movement reflect divine order, suggesting that the stars serve as signs of God's wisdom and control over the universe. So basically, it's also saying by calling them lights that they're not merely physical objects, but instruments. And when you look into that a little bit deeper, this is also something that helped me acknowledge that astrology definitely, or the stars and planets definitely have influence over us, is not thinking of them as really distant physical rocks or gas balls when you see them as energetic spheres of light that are very relevant to Earth's geocentric model, that's when it makes a lot more sense of how they actually do have influence over us. And it's referring to them in these texts as lights as well. So it's the idea that God's power is manifested and his creation is governed. As I mentioned earlier, the many, and I'm just trying to keep this short. I'm probably already going over
No,
time,
no,
but
it's all right. It's not a strict time. We take as long as we need. Uh,
okay, good.
get your
Well, even still,
get your point
um,
over. However you need to get it over. We can run further. It's not a problem.
oh, thanks, Tony. I appreciate your flexibility. But yes,
And we're not
um,
governed by any astrological time clock here.
yeah, that's right. That's the only one really going on. But yeah, the idea is that I've just taken one example, but I've looked into so many of them. And when you really look into them, you start to realize that they all talk about astrology. They all talk about it in the context of it's God's will and it controls earth and human affairs. Like it's just always stated. Now, I think it was removed from the Bible on purpose because, again, us knowing about this, particularly knowing about sidereal astrology instead of tropical, brings so much power back into ourselves. It brings us on a level up, kind of very similar to where these elites are hanging out, knowing all of this and keeping it hidden from us. So then there's also the Book of Tobit, which includes references to celestial events influencing human lives again, and particularly with the story of Tobias and his journey, guided by angelic forces, including moments where divine intervention appears to align with the stars and the signs. Now, guided by angelic forces is used in a couple of these books as well. So
I wonder
you
what
can kind of
angelic
pair that.
forces they are.
Yeah, you can kind of pair that a little bit with the archons, I
Yeah.
suppose, or just like some kind of entities
These scripts,
that
these scriptures. Sorry to
no,
inter,
you go ahead.
yeah, but looking at them, they kind of the wording that they use is that they're just glamorizing an
Yeah.
essentially evil system. Just the way that they've written all of this, but when the devil's in the detail, right? Like he's governed, the creation is governed, like it's telling you what this place is, right? So,
Yeah.
sorry, carry on. Just an
No,
observation.
that's all good. That's what I mean. Like guided by angelic forces, they also use, the words like divine, for instance. So yeah, they can definitely read between the lines there. But you can definitely take from these books that the celestial signs are symbolic. They point towards the idea that the heavens align with or reflect human destiny. It's really undeniable. So I think at this point, it's you're very, very ignorant if you don't think that the zodiac, the planets, and their positionings and aspects with each other has any sort of influence over Earth and humans. It's ignorance at this point. It doesn't matter whether you perceive it as, negative, controlling, positive, whatever. At the end of the day, it's undeniable that it definitely influences our lives,
The
for
problem is
sure.
most people are looking at tropical astrology, aren't they? So
Oh,
it's
yes.
complete. Even if you go by the premise that yeah, you believe that in astrology and everything, it's like you're looking at the wrong stuff anyway. So you're still not going to get
Yeah.
a real understanding of what's going on. So there's only like you and Ola. I don't know any other astrologers out there that are actually talking like. I'm sure there are some. It's not really my niche, but yeah, so you've still got people looking left when they should be looking right, essentially, which is obviously by design.
That's exactly right. The tropical system, I definitely think was just an agenda to keep everyone trapped in like an extra overlay of a matrix identity that's not actually your identity at all. Because when people start to, everyone always grows up thinking of themselves maybe as like a Libra, and then they come to me and I'm like, no, the sun was in Virgo, and then they have a little bit of an identity crisis.
Yeah, some people
That's
cling to
what it's
their
done.
astrological sign, like they get really defensive over like what sign they are, and now we know they're not even that sign anyway, right? It's just
No.
like it's the
And even
people love
still,
it. They love something to identify with, even if it's just a star, It's crazy.
Yeah, even still, I never recommend identifying yourself with any part of your chart. So even if you go onto, you can try as hard as you want looking through and searching up Amelie Gillerat on the internet, but you're not even going to really find much information about my chart at all. You know, I don't have in my bio my sun, moon, rising sign at all because that's not what I'm here for. That's not what I'm talking about. It's not to pick up an identity and carry that with you. It's just to have awareness of, okay, well, what sun was the constellation in when I was born and how is that influencing me? Okay, was it aspecting Saturn or Pluto? How's that influencing me? What house is in? That's the way to really see it. It's not to claim an identity based off that placement because that's only strengthening the tether and strengthening the influence.
Mm. And I think when you look into terms of like soul, the soul trick and everything like that, we need to be detaching from all these earthly things and earthly concepts. So that's another one that you can add to the list, really.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last slide is just going back into how a lot of us know that ancient architecture was extremely, very much built in alignment with astrological constellations and placements. So, that they built structures in alignment with stars, planets, other celestial phenomena, and that these structures very much reflect a deep connection between the heavens and earth, revealing that astronomy and astrology were very much central to the spiritual, cultural, and political life of these ancient societies. It's undeniable that when you go through so many different ancient architectures, one, they were built with fractal geometry, which is the inherent pattern all through nature. It's kind of like the pattern of infinity. It organizes chaos into order, which is what the fractal geometrical mathematic code is. And they built architecture in alignment with that. Whereas today we see a lot of architecture built with basic shapes, such as the square, that we live in a lot of square shaped buildings, which in ancient society, they never built with plain square shapes because they knew that that traps energy and limits potential. So living in square shaped houses these days, that's like whatever energy is going on within the house. If there's an argument, if there's, if you walk into a house that there's a lot of negativity that goes on in this family, you feel it because that energy has no way of escaping. It's trapped in that household. So they never did that. They always built structures that were pointing upwards, with circles pointing upwards. And that had a major impact. And also, building architecture with fractal geometry and sacred geometry is living in alignment with nature. Because that is a natural frequency, it means that you can live in buildings surrounded by nature and still pretty much be living in nature. Right now, living in basic designed buildings and square-shaped cars, square-shaped offices, we're very disconnected from nature energetically. But going back to the astrological architecture, I didn't gather too many pictures, but I just pulled up a few different examples. I don't even think I'm going to try saying half of these, but the most known, so there's Stonehenge, there's the Great Pyramids of Giza, pyramids all throughout the world as well, but particularly with these pyramids, they are literally built in alignment with the Orion's belt. So many of them are they all have their own unique connection, and realistically what it does is just mainly shows the importance of astrology and astronomy. I don't think it was for any sort of like spells or rituals, but it was more so just to further connect society and earth with the astrological systems in the sky. Now, this is going back into so many deep things, whether back in this last age before the reset, whether they were living a little bit more, they were definitely living a bit more free than us, that's for sure. But whether there was that negative overlay of the zodiac back then, not entirely sure about that. So it really depends. But either way, we have been completely disconnected from the astrological truth and reality of this realm, particularly for an agenda just to keep it hidden and only used by the elites of this world. But yeah, I'll just stop sharing my screen. That finished my
Excellent. No,
little
yeah.
presentation.
No, fascinating stuff. So, Yeah, just another thing that's been hidden from us that's coming to the surface now, and yeah, like you say, we don't have to be completely ruled by these codings once we understand what they are, and they don't have to hold us back, but they do have a heavy influence on us, that's for sure. So
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
fascinating stuff. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention, or anything parting message that you wanted to give people around your work, or how people can empower themselves?
Um, yeah, well, A plus listening skills, Tony summed it up very well. But yeah, so I guess um basically like just to be able to relate with some of you, I grew up not believing in astrology at all. I never thought about it. It didn't even cross my mind. It was just something that I honestly didn't know anything about. So it took me a little bit of time to actually get into astrology myself. And that's why I take pride in the idea that, okay, I'm studying astrology or I'm practicing it, but I'm not actually a mainstream astrologer, anyways. What it took me to sort of comprehend that there is actually an influence going on in this world and sort of a mechanical universe that we do live in was through a few different steps. And to summarize that, it was essentially I was like, okay, I'm just going to look into my tropical chart. All right, that didn't resonate. In my tropical chart, I'm very much water and earth. And then in my true sidereal chart, my elements completely switch and I'm very much fire and air. And once I discovered my true sidereal chart, that's when I was like, okay, no, this makes sense. Like, how is it this accurate? And that's how I started to realize that, okay, tropical is definitely not true. And all Eastern societies still use sidereal astrology. It's also known as Vedic astrology. And it's just following the current sky. It makes so much more sense and it always aligns and is more accurate, especially when you're looking into your polarities, your the cross that you bear, like in the Bible when it talks about pick Jesus said, pick up your cross and follow me. It's the three modalities, the cardinal, fixed, or mutable cross. So depending on what constellation the sun was in, that's the cross that you were born with. Now, even just knowing your cross has such an important aspect. It's just your sun sign and the modality that it is has such an important influence on your life and how you approach your life from an esoteric standpoint. Because again, without knowing these things, without knowing your chart and the cross that you bear, you're really limited in life because you're just going to keep going and living the same patterns, having the same difficult challenges that with awareness and with some different changes and like a path that you realize you can follow, you can really overcome that. Like Tony said, you can rewrite your own music. You don't have to live by the will of the matrix. You only do that if you're just a sleepwalker. But through knowledge of astrology, you can become a lucid dreamer. Like you really can. You can actually consistently learn how you can have more control over your light and your fate, life and fate for sure.
That's why they call it willpower. I think you inject your will, your intention on this matrix on your life, then I definitely feel that you can transcend these things. So yeah, fascinating stuff. I could talk to you for hours about all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Guys, check out Amelie's website. It's she reads the stars.com. I'll put all the links in the description. You got a YouTube channel as well, right?
Yeah, my YouTube channel is just Amelie Gillerat,
Okay. I'll put
if
all
you
the
can figure
links.
out how to spell my last
Yeah,
name.
yeah, I can't even say it, let alone spell it.
Yeah.
I can speak a bit of Spanish, but my French isn't too good. So,
Oh,
um,
that's okay.
well, it's great having you on. And yeah,
Yeah,
like I said,
thank
put the
you.
links in the description below. Guys, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and yeah, uh, thanks for watching.
Thank you.